All right. So Trump in DC. So Trump sent the National Guards into DC Monday, I believe. Yeah, Monday. And the DC and he took over the DC Police Department as well. Now, the mayor of DC, she sued the Trump administration or the DOJ, and a judge said that he cannot take over the police department, but he can still bring in the National Guard, which the National Guard is there. So she issued a lawsuit. DC sues over Trump administration attempted takeover of city police to halt the police. However, the National Guard is still there. We see this video here. You know, they're I guess questioning people. 42 to 47% of DC are black people. And you have white people make up about 30 or 32%, and the rest is other. But within that black people, you know, I think they are including the immigrants as well. I'm not sure. But once upon a time, DC was considered Chocolate City. Are black Americans being targeted in Trump DC takeover? And I want to play this clip here at Narc and Cobra, whatever. But he's also a professor at Howard. And apparently, Howard University is sending out a memo telling the students to carry their IDs. Well, don't you carry your ID with you anyway? So I want to play this clip and I want us to have a discussion. And I'm going to go to Mia first. Girl, why you ain't correct me? Mia.
Well, because it's all right.
I'm sorry, Mia. All right.
But the thing that will trigger their ire may very well be the stick. Because see, the thing about white nationalism is finally that its overreach comes with its hubris that can ultimately trigger the type of response that we need. This won't change until black athletes decide to stop going to Texas and Texas A&M. This won't stop until black stop spending money. But see, they won't feel that until a supermajority in Texas, a majority of the federal legislature, like what we're seeing in D.C., starts harassing black people in the streets. We got an email today at Howard University, and I'm still in Egypt, so we return to school next week. But I got my email, checked my email, and here's an email instructing students, faculty, staff, and folks that on Howard University campus to always carry your IDs. Make sure you're in count.
That's the South African apartheid bullshit.
That is exactly right. And Roland, what you just said, brother, that is where we're headed. And I can't tell, frankly, I mean, it's hard for me to contain my enthusiasm. I welcome it. Let me tell you why I welcome it. Nelson Mandela doesn't become the president of South Africa without the Sharpeville massacre, without going to jail for 27 years. There's going to be some pain ahead, and that's where you find the heroic age. We're not going to get out of this without pain. And I really don't think that the handful of moderate Democrats, if the state caucus, black caucus in Texas were to say we're not going, I really don't think that the Democratic Party would still have the gumption not to give them quorum, because there's going to be some punk ass Democrats who are not black who would simply go in there. I think ultimately the only way this is going to be resolved is by direct confrontation. And we have passed the time when we could have used the ballot. And as Malcolm said, it may be another alternative coming up soon that we're going to have to finally face. But when we face that, then we're going to get some change. But I think this moment may be on the verge of passing, brother.
What are your thoughts on Trump taking over DC? And do you think that black Americans in DC are being targeted?
So I think it's definitely a hostile takeover. DC, is federal land. I mean, Congress owns the rights to DC, point blank, period. Congress is the gavel. They are judge, jury, and executioner. That's just how the Constitution was written, because they were afraid if they put the capital in an actual state that the state would have more sway than the other states, which is why they created DC. However, I feel like it's messy. It should have been better coordinated. I don't think the National Guard needs to be in there. I agree with deputizing FBI agents and having actual agents to supplement the police and clean up the streets, but I don't think we should put the National Guard in that kind of precarious predicament. That is not their job. I mean, there is crime in DC. There's crime in all major cities. I'm not opposed to... My biggest thing when it comes to crime in major cities is that these are sons, these are daughters, these are nephews, these are grandsons, these are cousins, these are spouses. Why are we not cleaning up our own families? Why are we not better family values? Why are we raising people that traffic humans? Why are we raising people that traffic narcotics? Why are we raising these people like this? So it's like every single person comes from a family. So we really need to stop relying on the police and everybody needs to start cleaning up their own families. And unfortunately, since we're not doing it properly, unfortunately, the police have to come in and do it. And most people that live in dangerous areas that are just trying to make a living, that are just trying to survive, making $1 out of 15 cents, are happy when trash is taken out. They don't want to live next to drug dealers. They don't want to live next to human traffickers. They don't want to live next to trap houses. They don't want to live next to crazy either. So I don't agree with the National Guard, but I do agree with utilizing FBI agents to help clean up the streets, because we've seen what DC police can do. We've seen what New York police can do, or lack thereof. Baltimore, Chicago, Birmingham, Alabama, Jacksonville, Florida, multiple cities in Cali. We have left it to these police departments, and we see that they are not doing a proper job. Americans deserve to live, breathe, and eat clean air, clean water, and have clean streets, and be able to walk with their children to parks. I mean, 4 babies have already been murdered in DC. 29 kids under 18 from the ages of 12 to 18 have already died this year. It's August. They've already had hundreds of murders, over 7,000 thefts, through over 3,000 carjackings with a deadly weapon. This is dangerous. And we need to take care of our own community, but we also need to start realizing sometimes we might have to turn in our family members in order to get them the help that they need, so they stop terrorizing other families and stop it. That's just my opinion.
It was some touchy points in there. Me and ready to turn into families, honey. That's committing crimes. I want to go to either Gavin or Divine. Do you one of y'all want to rebut?
Okay, let me just say this. Well, Dana, I don't know if you're aware, but they just had on The Guardian, it was reported that the Trump administration had been scaling back on, they agreed to scale back in part on Pam Bondi's executive order with that with regards to the MPD, and they've also spoken with the DC mayor, Muriel Bowser, and so forth. I don't know if you were aware of that. I was just reading it right now because there was a court decision. I don't know too. I've been to DC once. I'm aware it is a federal district, is correct. I would say also I'm not a fan necessarily of National Guard coming in. Uh, I will say this, and let me just give some people some rights on stuff. Different laws in different areas, of course. There is something called stop and identify laws, of course, in different states and jurisdictions, where there is a requirement if police believe there's reasonable suspicion that someone is committing a crime and so forth, they can stop you and they can ask you for ID. However, part of the detainment is that you can't be detained for a longer period of time or anything like that. It can only be a reasonable amount. I have seen some of these videos. I'm cautious about speaking on some of them because although I've seen some of the videos where it seems like the officers just randomly coming up asking for people for their ID, which is problematic. I don't know the circumstances of how exactly some of those officers came about once. So my content and comment on this situation is limited. I am aware that presidents, and they have done this before, although it's rarely, they do call the National Guard in circumstances. They did it with Johnson did it in the 60s.
Really, man. Who knows?
W. Bush did it in the 90s with Rodney King and another matter, of course. And now Trump is doing it. He did it in Los Angeles as well. So I'm cautious with these things, of course. Certainly, you see videos like that. I don't know the circumstance if that was actually behind all of that, if they were answering to anything in particular, why they were there. But it does seem to be an issue.
Do you think Black people are being targeted
I think
first
black
and most?
I think Black people have been targeted by police, to be honest. I I I don't know too much about because I'm not in DC, I'm only looking at the stories that are on X. It seems just from looking at that video in particular, and I did see this one. I don't know what the officers were doing, why they were out there, if they got a call for that or anything like that. Clearly, it doesn't look like they had a warrant. You didn't see it from the video, which a warrant would allow someone to the police, if they have it detailed and described, to go in there. Of course, there is such a thing as warrantless exceptions that cops can even go into a home. The Fourth Amendment always applies, but keep in mind, but keep in mind something too, Dana. The Constitution should be at play at all times, even with federal officers when they're talking about entering people's homes and so forth. And everyone in particular, especially in DC, should be familiar, especially with their laws. And I think it's, with their laws and what's going on there, and educate yourself on it. I think this is an issue. Again, I think especially if someone's being harassed and so forth, or you're being stopped or detained or treated wrongfully, the one thing I'll tell you, just like I would say with these, similar with these stop and frisk policies, please get these officers' IDs, their badge numbers. Don't fight back physically. Your job is to get from point A to point B with these situations. Handle it later, even in court.
Well, if honestly, somebody in the chat said something about Ohio has a lot of high crime rate and high drug addiction. And I live in Ohio. I don't live in that part though. And Mark, Dana, are you looking at the comments? I glaze at the comments to make sure people are on the up and up. But if I'm not pulling questions, honey, send in super chat. Those are the ones I recognize first and most and foremost. But anyway, I want my neighborhood to stay quiet. I don't want to see people hanging outside. I don't want to hear loud music. I don't want to see people littering. I don't want to see trash. I don't, whether you white, black, I don't want to see certain types in my neighborhood. I don't want to live next to them. I like police patrol. I like police presence. So if you are in an urban area, and I grew up in an urban area, and people hang out all times of the night. Things go on that should not be going on. That could be dangerous. But majority of the people that live in urban areas, they're good people. And they have kids. They want to get up. They want to go to work. They don't have to worry about anybody getting shot or, hearing shots or being robbed or nothing like that. So for me personally, if I know I've been in a high crime area, for a minute, whatever the reason may be, crime is crime. And then now you're bringing in extra hands, such as whether it's the DEA or the National Guard. When you bring in those type of people behave differently. You're not going to see people hanging out, drinking, smoking, selling drugs, shooting or whatever. That will cease. So I want to see police presence if I know I'm living in a crime-ridden area. I don't have a problem with that. And if I'm not, like where I live at now is quiet, I want to maintain that. So the question this question could be a little bit tricky. Are Black Americans being targeted?
But just sitting down on your porch and on your porch step is not a crime. That's not criminal. And so when I saw the video, there's another video I saw where the cops just randomly came up to the brothers and asked for their ID. That was what was problematic, what I saw. Now, I don't know why the officers, if they're just walking around, fine, but stopping them, asking them for ID. And I'm not familiar with DC's per se, if there is a stop and identify statute. But I just think, that's not a crime that they were doing if they're just sitting there talking.
Right.
Can I say something?
DC is not stopping this.
I would like to
stop and identify.
give my input as well.
I was going to say, I did watch some interesting videos on TikTok and YouTube where, as Danny, you were saying, when there is a heavier police presence, crime seems to slow down and cease. And this person had taken, the view of their street, as you could, view of their street from a month ago to yesterday. And then they did today. And it was like night and day. There was no defecation on the sides. There was no anything crazy. Shootings have been down. I mean, every everything is down now that they have increased the police presence in some of the worst areas or worst streets. So, I mean, it is having the effect that it needs to have. Like, the effect is Americans, especially Black Americans in these neighborhoods, should be able to be outside and have a cigarette on their stoop without catching a bullet. Their children should be able to enjoy. Their children should be able to enjoy being outside with them without catching a bullet. I mean, our kids deserve to get air. I mean, they deserve to be able to walk to the park without their parents having to fret and having to constantly duck and walk over defecation on the streets or anything like that. So, I mean, it's not really fair to these kids, and it's not really fair to people that are just trying to live, because people need to stop treating us like we're a monolith. 99% of us are just trying to live. We're trying to survive. We're trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. We're paying our bills, and we're just trying to survive. And it is only that 1% that's ruining it for everybody else. And to be honest, I hope the police take out that 1%, because honest people live in disenfranchised areas and they deserve the chance to survive and be outside with their children. They shouldn't have to keep their kids in the house attached to a screen, which makes it even worse. And then now they have a bunch of medical diagnoses they probably wouldn't have had, but they can't go outside because it's way too freaking dangerous. I mean, 29 kids in August. So far, 29 kids, including the 4 infants, have died in DC from stray bullets, and they were all Black kids. They're dying in the streets. So something needs to be done, and we need to save our youth. And if we don't start now, then when are we going to start?
Devon?
Yeah, I would love to see that stat that Mia is citing. I would love to see that. So that's one. Two, what I would say is, to answer your question directly, are the police targeting Black Americans? At this point, we don't know, right? What we do know is that the majority of the videos that are coming out are of them policing and or harassing Black people in DC. Now, I think there's a couple of things happening at the same time, right? Because I think roughly 2 years ago, there's a video of Mayor Bowser asking for the National Guard to come in, but to be under her control, right? So let's not act like this was an invention or creation of the right wing or Trump.
Okay.
Right? So they were both asking for this, right? So let's, them, and that's my issue with the Democrats trying to paint this as, oh, it's white supremacy that they even put them in. And now Bowser was just asking for them roughly 2 years ago, undivided. So let's cut that narrative out. And so that could also be why most of the videos that are coming out are of them harassing folks that look like us, because that's the narrative that they want to paint already. As soon as these videos start to come out, again, those same gatekeepers that we've been talking about tonight, they are the ones, just like the video you just played, they're the main ones coming out. Look at this. This is so horrible. It's talking about slave papers, and they're conflating what's happening now with the legacy of what happened to our people in this country to create the outrage, to try to then invoke us to come out as a collective to then fight for this Democrat agenda. So there's a number of things going on at the same time. Now, what I will say as a resident of a state that had stop and frisk for a very long time before it was ruled unconstitutional, if what I would like to see are all the videos of these same National Guardsmen in white neighborhoods, asking them for their IDs, making sure that nothing's going on the cul-de-sac. You know what I'm saying? Making sure they're not selling any drugs in their communities, in their parks, because we understand that our community historically has been over-policed. And so when you have this concept of broken window policing, you find crime, right? And so what has happened is that our community has a history of being over-policed. But like I said, if Mia has that stat with those, kids are getting gunned down in the street, I would definitely love to see that, because that's definitely something that needs to be addressed. I know with the stat that I saw, I think there were about 100, like a little bit over 100 homicides last year, or in 2024. So that doesn't scream emergency to me. Obviously, no one should die. And I think you need emergency powers to invoke what Trump has done with the National Guard in, federal, in Washington, D.C. But that's beside the point. To the question of targeting, like I said, in New York City, where stop and frisk was implemented, it was shown that they specifically and intentionally and purposely targeted Black Americans and Latinos in New York for the Stop and Frisk initiative. So they were not stopping and frisking everybody. They were not stopping and frisking people at random. It was racially motivated. And they had a particular objective to stop and frisk Black Americans and Hispanics. And in fact, there was an audio that came out with a Black American officer that had some issues with the way in which they were trying to implement it. And he had stopped, I believe, he stopped and frisked a white person that had hopped the train. And his lieutenant or sergeant told him, no, that's not who we're trying to stop and frisk. Right? Don't frisk them. And so you see that even when there is a policy or something that should be for the good of our community, because all of us want to stop crime, we see that the institution, going back to systemic, there is an underlying foundation of systemic targeting of Black Americans. And we're seeing that on display through the videos, right? And so if I think they're gonna be at this for 30 days if they can't get it extended. And so I would love to see at that point the numbers that are compiled, but just, call me a cynic, but I believe that at the end of the 30 days, we're going to see that same systemic bias and racial targeting in the people that they stopped, in the neighborhoods that they policed. And even when you look at some of the arrests that they have posted on their site, because they've been going around and arresting people, it's mostly Black people, whether it's Black Americans or Afro immigrants, we don't know off the top of our head. But what we also know is that they're being arrested for petty offenses. There's no kingpins. There's nobody that's going on a shooting spree that they stop. These are all petty offenses that they've been arrested. So that's where I start to have an issue and lean more in toward, they're targeting like they always target.
Dana with the data. Dana with the data.